right, well, I'm Mark Dakiv from Calgary, Alberta. In 2 days, I'm flying to New Zealand, so the house is crazy, everything's hectic. I'm going to give you my history of how I got involved with Frisbee and disc golf and all that. So let's see here. I guess when I was about 5 or 6, I don't know, my older brother was throwing Frisbees. He was able to throw the sidearm, you know, the old world-class Frisbees, 165 gram with the little sticker on it, the little raised top. So he was able to throw sidearm, which was kind of really cool. There was no organized disc sports I'm from St. Catharines, Ontario. There's no organized sports of Frisbee at all. So I really liked that. I love playing Frisbee. I learned how to flick, you know, sidearm as well at that age. And then I really enjoyed Frisbee, so I went to the library, looked through the cards, looked for Frisbee, got a book called Frisbee by the Masters. So that explained everything about all the different sports, the MTA, disc golf, ultimate, TRC, distance, all that. So I loved it, and I just started buying Frisbees, and I started creating my own Frisbee golf kind of courses on my road, and all the Frisbees were getting chewed up, so then I'd finally go to the park, and then I'd make holes, like, you know, around the soccer post and land on the merry-go-round and stuff like that. And so that was around 10, 11 years old I was doing this kind of stuff. And I used to play soccer, and at the end of one of the soccer practices, I saw this guy in the corner of the field, and he was throwing like dozens of Frisbees just as far as he could. I'd never seen anybody do that. So I walked up to him and asked him what he's doing and all the Frisbees and everything. And he was an ultimate player at Brock University in St. Catharines. He was a freestyler. He would glue the things on his nails. So, and he had all these 40 mold, 119 grams. I think they were the 119, the world-class Frisbees. So before I met him, I had the 97, the 119, the 133, the 141. I liked all the Frisbees. I bought them all, but then he had all these special ones. He had the 80 molds. He had these HDX plastics. And he had some Discovering the World magazines. So we're talking late 70s. So that's where I learned this power grip. I think that's where I learned the Bonapane grip way back then from that magazine. So what happened? Went to university. There was a tournament in Toronto, at the University of Toronto. I ended up skipping one of my exams so I could go there and play. They had all the different events, but I just went for the disc golf, and I've never used proper golf discs before. So it's the first time I've seen the golf discs. So I got an F15 Eagle Lightning disc, and the first time I threw it, it just went like this. And so that was the first time I ever was introduced to real golf discs. So that was sometime in the mid to late 80s. And then I met the guys from Calgary. I met the Calgary Cynics. And so I ended up working in Calgary. I was in the co-op program back and forth. So I ended up coming out here to Calgary, then back to school, Calgary, Waterloo. And I started playing with the Cynics. And I moved out here in the early 90s. And at the time, I was playing with the Cynics for 1 or 2 years, and then injuries took over, and then I said no more of that, just play disc golf. And we had a target course at Pierce Estates Park at the fish hatchery, and it was just 9 holes, but there was a front and a back 9, and then we finally got baskets, so that was Calgary's first disc golf course. That's where I met Rudy Faulkner way back in the day. And then I guess it started to grow from there. We put in Canmore, we put in the course there and cleared out a lot of brush, and that was a big ordeal. So that's taken me up until mid-90s. And then in 97, I was getting, 96, 97, I was quite involved in running tournaments and doing all that. And I think one of the fun tournaments I had before I left to go over to New Zealand was we played 2 rounds we played the morning round at Pierce Estates, the afternoon round at Baker Center. And Baker was a bit different back then. We had a different section we used, and we used the big Sun Bowl area and all that. And then we'd go over to camp over in Canmore along the Bow River, and then we'd play 2 rounds on Sunday at Canmore. And that's kind of, I guess, a carryover from the ultimate days with the Cynics. They always had crazy parties, so these disc golf tournaments had pretty crazy parties involved as well. So then in 97, I ended up going to New Zealand. And I took a 6-month leave from working here in Calgary, and I loved it there, and I ended up staying 6 years and went through citizenship and the whole bit, and I was really involved in the grassroots disc golf scene over there. And at the time they had one course in Queenstown, which is the bottom of the South Island, and it had a few baskets, but it wasn't a full basket course. They didn't have a full basket course. I think there was one full basket course on Waiheke Island, but it was kind of short, and I think it was meant to be used with ultimate discs and that. So I put in the first all-basket disc golf course in New Zealand in a place called Upper Hutt, which is about, I don't know, half an hour outside of Wellington, which is the bottom of the North Island. And they ended up filming a lot of Lord of the Rings there, which was pretty cool. So there's a lot of scenes in the Lord of the Rings that, like that's basket 2, and that's, you know, that's tee off 8 and all that sort of stuff. As I'm watching the movie, I can see that. So there's certain scenes where, like in the beginning, there's a scene overhead with a horse-drawn carriage going over a gravel path, and that crisscrosses like hole 2 and hole 4 and hole 8. And there's a scene where the hobbits are having their second breakfasts or something like that, and that's tee off 2. And Saruman's tower is where basket 8 is. And one of the cool things that I was able to experience there was we saw this big pile of branches and tree limbs and everything, and we looked around. We didn't see anything that was different in our park. We thought, okay, they're doing some pruning, but didn't notice anything change. And then the next time we visited, there was even more. There was this huge pile of all these tree limbs. So I went over and took a look at it all, and you could see that these were cut very clean with holes drilled through to be bolted back together. So what they did was they cut down some live trees from somewhere else and transported them and brought them to the Harcourt Park disc golf course where I was, and they laid them all out, and they were all numbered, and then they ended up putting them together and recreating these trees, and they had these huge hydraulic plates that were probably about, like, I don't know, 8 foot, 6 foot diameter, 10 foot, I don't know, they were massive, these hydraulic plates, and they built the trees on top of these. So there were 3 spots that they had these hydraulic plates. They built all the trees, and of course the leaves and all that were wilting, so they had all these fake olive leaves and all these fake little branches that they added to it. And then there's a scene in the movie where Christopher Lee, this is Saruman, he's telling his orcs to build his army and build all the weapons, and the orc says, like, the roots grow deep, master, or something, and Saruman just says, rip them all down. And then the next scene it's kind of a dark scene, it's not even very well lit, and you just see these orcs pulling on some ropes or some chains, and they're pulling the tree down. So they built all of this massive structure for that scene that would last a second or two, and then the trees came down. So anyway, that was just a testament to what was going on in New Zealand at the time, how crazy they did for the filming and all that sort of stuff. So I found some of these little olive leaves, so I kept some just for keepsakes and that. So then, yeah, let's see. So the disc golf scene was just starting to grow in there. That was in 2001 when I put in that course. I stayed there for about 6 years, and then when I came back to Calgary, the scene here was exploding or starting to, I guess, explode, and it's just been going crazy ever since. And right now, 2021, it's crazy. The tournaments go up and they're filled up in no time, in half an hour, an hour. So it was really cool to see the Grassroots Society here before I left in the late 90s, and then to see it again over there in New Zealand, and then come back to see this. So I'm pretty excited to go over there, and because it's going nuts there too, and be part of that again and reconnect with a lot of the people. Let's see, while I was in New Zealand, I went to my first Worlds in 2000. And that's because, let's see, in 2001, the World Games in Akita, Japan, disc golf was a introductory sport. I don't know if that's the right term, but it was a tester sport to see if they were going to introduce it or not. And so you had to qualify in the 2000 World Games to get a spot in the 2000 World Championships to get a spot in the 2001 World Games. So there were 6 of us from New Zealand that went there in 2000, and that was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I think that was maybe one of the first Worlds where they combined pros and amateurs together. So there was 800 or some odd players. It was crazy. And that's where I saw the real crazy big disc golf scene, because I was in New Zealand doing the grassroots stuff there. And that's where I met all the top guys. And, you know, I ended up meeting Stork, and ended up meeting Hedrick, and all the top players. And I think that's when Dr. Rick Vokes was playing in the top 4, in the final 4, and I think he got 3rd. Or maybe that was a different tournament. So that's when I went to Worlds for New Zealand, because I was living there as a citizen, and then ended up playing quite a few Worlds over the years. And then when I came back here to Canada, my buddy Simon Feasey, who was also at the first Worlds in 2000 and 2001, we always would reconnect and meet at the Worlds all the time and keep in touch. So when I installed that course at Harcourt Park, I used the baskets that Simon made at the time his company was called Eclipse Sport, I think. And that's kind of the first version of what he has now with RPM, with that Helix, and he's modified it over the years. So those were the baskets that I used back then, because getting baskets to New Zealand was just crazy expensive. So we made our own over there and modified them over the years. I don't know, let's see, I guess my best finish at one of the Worlds would have been in 2012 in Santa Cruz. Maybe it wasn't 12, I think it was 12. I finished 3rd in Masters, and that was interesting because on the first round I was on the 3rd card, just randomly, and I stayed on the 3rd, or on the, yeah. No, I didn't finish 3rd, I finished 7th. I didn't finish 3rd, but I was on the 2nd hole the whole time. That's how it was. So that was my best finish. I don't know what else. I've been lucky enough to play all over the place. Simon and I put in a course in Fiji, just on Namina Island. It's one of the top 10 scuba diving resorts, I guess, in the world, and it's just, they have about 4 or 5 huts, that's it. And so I incorporated a trip when I went over to New Zealand when they had the first Aussie Open. I can't remember what year that would have been, 2015 maybe? When they had the first Aussie Open, and it was super hot, and all the top guys were out there. So we went to the Aussie Open, then New Zealand had their nationals, and some of the guys from the Aussie Open came to the New Zealand nationals, like Felberg and Lizotte, and a few of the other guys came there. And then we went over to Fiji, and Simon had his family, and I took my family. We stayed there for a week, and we installed this beautiful 9-basket course right along the beach and that. And all the locals that were working there, they just loved it, and they were doing all the work, and they just loved it, and they were all forehand geniuses. In no time, they picked up the flick, and it was wicked to play with them. And anytime they had free time, they'd be out playing, which was pretty awesome. And then unfortunately, there was some tornado or cyclone that ripped through there a year or two, something after that, and just kind of leveled that section of the island, and it's all gone. But that was a magical little time we did there. Oh, minis. Yes, minis. So so the first Worlds in 2000 in Ann Arbor, Michigan, there was Simon and myself and Super Flamin' Knees guy, Shane Vuletich, and we played a lot of mini. And what we were doing is in the hallways of the hotels, they were long and narrow, we played mini throughout the hotel, throughout the hallways, and you know, all these guys would join us, and we started creating all these mini things throughout the hallways. So that's where I was learning to throw a mini really straight and really long, because you want to get it as far as you can down the hallways. So we went to the Worlds, we played mini there, and as I was just fooling around just outside the hotel before the tournament or anything, it was starting to get dark, and they had a few mini baskets set up, and we were throwing, and then there was one about, I'm saying 60 meters. You know, it hasn't grown over the years. It was about 60 meters. And I ended up throwing a beautiful shot, and I aced it right in front of Greg the Miniac Hosfeld. He was standing right there, so that was pretty crazy. I got a mini from him, nice ace, and so that was pretty cool. And then in 2001, Simon Feasey was in a playoff with Steve Rico and Avery Jenkins for the World Mini title, and Simon won in 2001 in Minnesota. And then in 2003, I was in a playoff with Steve Rico and Avery Jenkins. And I ended up winning that one. And actually, Steve Rico wasn't there because he got disqualified in the proper disc golf round, I guess, for having an altercation with one of the players at the Snow Bowl in Flagstaff, Arizona. So I ended up taking that in 2003. That was just kind of funny because Simon and I both had playoffs with those same two guys. Excuse me. Then in 2012, I think it was 2012, I won the Masters Mini. Steve Brinster ended up beating me by 1 stroke for the overall. He had the Open title. And then in 2018 in Kansas, I ended up taking the Grandmaster Mini title as well. So, and Chadrick von Heinlichen, I'm sorry, he ended up taking the Masters title in Kansas as well. So let's see. There was also Peter Bowie was a famous Frisbee all-round player from New Zealand, and I think he won the world overall in '87. Again, not sure on the dates, but yeah, he went to the World Champs and he won the overall. So when he was in Christchurch at the time. So when I was in New Zealand, I was lucky enough to play with him and play a few tournaments against him, and that was a blast. So then I hosted one tournament at the Harcourt Park course, and I did an all-round as well. So I had discathon, we had accuracy, TRC, MTA, freestyle, golf, of course. We did distance. So we did everything we could back then. But again, grassroots, you're lucky to have 10, 20 people sort of thing show up for that. So I remember when I started going to the first few Worlds way back in 2000, 2001 and that, and we were talking to all the guys, the head guys, Donna Pace and all those guys from Innova and Discraft and everything. And back then there were rumors of, I wonder if Nike is going to take over or if Adidas is going to, just buy out everything. And there were people pro and against that kind of thing, so I don't know if that would happen now. I would hope it's gotten to the point where these guys can support the growth and stay, as Innova and Discraft and all these names that have been around for a long time, and it doesn't get swept into the bigger names like Nike and Adidas and all that. I would hope these guys survive and they don't sell out and all that, but money talks, who knows what's going to happen. But I think it's at the point where it's exploding and it's going to go nuts. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have really any predictions. I just think it's like $10 million for 10 years. That's pretty insane. Talking about that 10 years ago, I don't think people would have thought of that 10 years ago. It's hard to name one or two because there's so many. And then if you're gonna leave people out, there's been so many great tournaments, so many great stories, so many great people, so many experiences that I've had over the years. I've been really blessed to be able to do all this for as long as I've done it and still be able to do it. I remember when I went to New Zealand and played on their courses, I was just amazed because just the scenery and these massive, volcanic craters or these Kumara pits, or it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience to be there to play that, because at the time, we didn't have what we had here. We had Canmore, which just started out, and that was awesome. But coming back, and then all the things that I've seen since I've been back, and how much it's growing and how much it's expanding, it's fantastic. Yeah, I couldn't pick a favorite course, favorite hole. I would have to think about that and maybe give you an update at some point, because I think if I thought of one, then I'd probably think of another one later that goes, oh yeah, no, I couldn't come up with that. It's such a demographic that we have. It's so wide, like so many different backgrounds are playing this sport, and predominantly there's so many decent people doing this. You're going to have good and bad in every sport, religion, business, whatever. But here, you got a way more good than bad sort of ratio. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's nice for that. It's really nice for that. The people are amazing.